Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty.
Good evening. I'm Rachel Maddow in New York. We are watching
Ms.
live
Hassan.
as the full U.S. Senate is voting on the nomination of
Mr.
Pete
Hawley.
Hegseth to be Secretary of Defense.
Mr. Heinrich.
It's a little hard to follow. You're hearing the names called, but you can't necessarily hear the answers from the senators in terms of whether they are yeses or nos. We have a sort of a tally there on the screen that doesn't necessarily tally to what we are able to hear, to overhear, but the clerk will make clear what the votes are. Before the last 24 hours, this nomination seemed like it was definitely going through. Test vote yesterday got 51 votes. That was yesterday. There's been more developing news on some of the myriad allegations against Hegseth, including some concerns about whether senators have been able to hear from people connected to those allegations. So heading into tonight, the reason we're covering this live is that there really have been signs of uncertainty. We expect he definitely will lose the two Republicans who voted against him in the procedural vote yesterday. That was Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. If Democrats all stick together, Hegseth, if Collins and Murkowski and all the Democrats are against him, he can only lose one more Republican and still be confirmed as Secretary of Defense. If he loses two, we're in different territory. So let's listen in.
Mr. Moran, Mr. Moreno, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr.
And we're going
Schmidt.
to take down this visual tally that we've got on the screen only because it's confusing. We can hear some of the senators' votes out loud, but very few of them. We'll get the tally from the clerk as it is tallied and as that official vote is taken. Overhearing here, we're only hearing some of the senators respond. Let's listen in to see what we can see.
Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young, Senators voting in the affirmative: Banks, Barrasso, Blackburn, Budd, Daines, Ernst, Fisher, Graham, Haggerty, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Justice, Kennedy, Lee, Lummis, Marshall, McCormick, Moreno, Mullen, Ricketts, Rounds, Scott of Florida, Sullivan, Thune, Tuberville, Wicker, and Young. Ms. Hassan? No. Mr. Blumenthal? No. Ms. Slotkin? Senators voting in the negative: Mr. Husted, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Baldwin, Blumenthal, Collins, Coons, Cortez Masto, Duckworth, Durbin, Hassan, Kane, Kelly, Kim, Lujan, Merkley, Murray, Padilla, Reed, Schatz, Schiff, Slotkin, and Wyden. Mr. Crapo, aye. Mr. Cotton, aye. Mrs. Moody, aye. Mr. Cornyn, aye. Ms. Murkowski, no. Mr. Warner, no. Ms. Also Brooks, no. Mrs. Capito, aye. Mr. Ossoff, no.
We're watching the last remaining Senate votes come in on the Senate vote, confirmation vote for Pete Hegseth, the Fox News weekend morning co-host to be Secretary of Defense. We're watching this live along with you. Joining us now from the Capitol is Julie Sirkin, NBC News congressional correspondent, who's been covering this confirmation process closely. Julie, we're trying to listen, as I know you are as well. Can you tell us anything about how this vote is unfolding on the Senate floor right now, how it seems like this is going? We obviously saw a yes vote there from Joni Ernst, a no vote from Lisa Murkowski, two closely watched female Republican senators.
Yeah, and so far it is just Collins and Murkowski that have voted no on the Republican side of the aisle against Pete Hegseth. The two that I'm watching the most closely, I have not yet seen on the Senate floor, and that is Tom Tillis and Mitch McConnell, though McConnell had made his way to the floor a short while ago and might just be waiting over there. I'm just keeping an eye on the screen here. And certainly, Pete Hegseth can only afford to lose one more Republican vote and still get confirmed. I'm told J.D. Vance is in the building. He's close by just in case he needs to break a tie, any potential tie here. But, Rachel, my reporting all week on this has indicated that Republican senators who have had concerns about Pete Hegseth's nomination, not only because of the allegations in that affidavit, but perhaps most importantly, the answers that he gave during his confirmation hearing last week on how he would handle potential war crimes, the Geneva Convention, issues that are important for some Republicans in terms of the national security space on here. And certainly we do not know yet how they are planning to vote. I'm keeping my eye here on my phone. Pete Hegseth just posted on his X profile a letter that he wrote to Senator Tom Tillis. Appears to be answers to specific questions that he was asked. We know that Tillis sent him additional questions. This has to do specifically, I'm just reading this, Rachel, now. It was posted on his X account about the affidavit of Danielle Hegseth. It seems like Tillis had asked for detailed responses to questions to answers. And look, I have been talking to Tillis all week long. He told me that he is searching for witnesses to corroborate the information that Danielle Hegseth had put in her affidavit. You will note, Rachel, that we've gotten a response from Samantha Hegseth both before that affidavit became public and after, right when we were about to report that news. All she told us was she denied allegations of physical abuse in her marriage, but there were plenty of allegations in this affidavit affidavit that still had the attention and concern of Republican senators like Tom Tillis. It's a 2-page letter, and this is frankly stunning. I have to tell you, in my time covering the Capitol, I do not remember another moment in which a nominee came to the Capitol to observe his own vote. He is sitting off of the floor with his children and his wife, Jenny. It is still not clear, again, how Tillis will vote, or Mitch McConnell, but really this is a live ball, and it's pretty stunning, Rachel.
Yeah, Julie, obviously, just describing that affidavit from the former sister-in-law of Mr. Hegseth, what we were able to report here at MSNBC as of about less than 24 hours ago, is that Samantha Hegseth, Pete Hegseth's second wife, appears to be under the constraints of a non-disparagement clause that was part of her 2018 divorce from Pete Hegseth, thus raising questions as to how free she was to discuss further details of the allegations that concerned her. We do know from open source reporting that in a recent interview with FBI investigator Samantha Hegseth reportedly told FBI investigators that not only had Mr. Hegseth drunk to excess in his recent life history, but that he continues to do so. Senators have raised concerns about the allegations of fiscal mismanagement in veterans groups that he was part of, the drinking allegations, obviously, and the allegations about his involvement with women that he was married to and women who he says he had a woman who he said he had a consensual relationship with that nevertheless resulted in a police report, although no charges against Mr. Hegseth.
Rachel, if I could just jump in real quick, we just have a new tweet or post on X from Senator Tom Tillis about Hegseth, saying at the end of this tweet that I will support his confirmation and look forward to working with him to rebuild our military and advance President Trump's peace through strength agenda. This is so stunning because it is coming seconds after Pete Hegseth posted that long document revealing the questions and answers that he had provided to Tom Tillis about the allegations in the affidavit that clearly concerned him regarding his nomination. And I'm so glad you brought that up, that agreement that they had signed, because as I've been hearing from senators, and we've been trying to report this, who have you talked to about these allegations? What have they told you? What background was there? And what we kept hearing throughout this whole process was that it was really difficult to get some of these women to talk just because they could be bound by some confidentiality agreements. You mentioned the one in the case of Samantha Hegseth, but it appears that he will have the votes as long as all Democrats stay where they are and all Republicans stay where they are, given that Tom Tillis has now announced that he will be supporting Pete Hegseth's nomination. Again, we have not yet heard from Mitch McConnell, who has his own concerns in terms of his national security qualifications, his expertise, whether he has the temperament for the job, how he would lead the Pentagon Department, which is the largest federal agency. But in this case, it does appear to be that he will have the votes, with or without J.D. Vance breaking the tie.
So again, Julie, as we are watching for Senator McConnell's vote, if McConnell votes with Collins and Murkowski and votes no, that would put this vote, at least as far as we understand now, at 50-50, where the tie could then be broken in Mr. Hegseth's favor by J.D. Vance. Are there any other Republican senators besides Senator McConnell whose vote is either not in or otherwise known to be in question here?
I gotta be honest with you, I don't think so. I mean, a lot of these senators are up in 2026. We've been hearing for weeks now about the primary threats, not only when it comes to Pete Hegseth's nomination, but just making it really clear that if any of these senators decide to cross President Trump or vote against any of these nominees or do anything that could cross his agenda or his campaign promises, that they will be challenged, that money will be funneled to their primary opponents. And it is for that reason that I just can't imagine any other Republicans coming out now and voting against Pete Hegseth. And it also is because throughout this process, some of the names that we've been watching closely already voted yes for him. Senator Cornyn, Senator Young, Senator Joni Ernst, who is up in 2026, sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee, had reservations about Pete Hegseth, is a combat veteran, is a sexual assault survivor. But she made it very clear moments after the confirmation hearing last week that she would be supporting Pete Hegseth, and we saw her vote on the floor today affirming that vote. So at this point, we're waiting for McConnell, but it really does seem like this vote might be cooked, and it seems like Pete Hegseth will in fact be confirmed as Donald Trump's defense secretary. Now, I've seen stranger things happen before. This felt almost like it could have been that moment where John McCain at the last minute saved Obamacare repeal several years ago. But since that moment, things have been pretty predictable in terms of how they're going to go, both under the first Trump administration, both under President Biden. And this vote tonight had people really sitting on the edge of their seats. Tom Tillis wasn't even in the building all day. He seriously just came in for this vote. I don't even know if he officially voted yet, but his position is clear in his tweet. He did his due diligence after the confirmation hearing. I know he had serious concerns. He's communicated those to the administration. Before that, to the Trump transition. Certainly, there's been a lot of pressure on these senators, but ultimately, it does feel like even asking these questions of Pete Hegseth up until the final moment, which Hegseth just posted on X, which I find the timing so curious in that. But certainly it does appear like Hegseth will get confirmed. Tillis has officially voted yes for him, I'm told, on the Senate floor. Now we're just waiting for McConnell and potentially J.D. Vance if he has to break a tie.
All right, Julie, if you'd stand by, we've got Senator Tammy Duckworth joining us to talk about what she's seeing and what she understands about this process thus far. Senator Duckworth, I really appreciate you being here as a member of the Armed Services Committee and a senator voting tonight. What's your understanding of the state of play?
Well, I think the vote is cooked. Basically, this is not John McCain's Republican Party anymore. This isn't Mitt Romney's Republican Party anymore. The folks who have the courage to stand up to Donald Trump are gone. And even those who have real concerns are not willing to jeopardize their own political survival and are willing to jeopardize our nation's national security. And it's really sad to be here watching this vote happen. I just cast my no vote on the floor. And I voted for both of Trump's previous Secretary of Defense nominees in his previous term, but they were qualified to do the job, and Pete Hegseth is by far unqualified to do this job, and they're just falling in line for him.
We've never had a defense secretary confirmed in terms like this. Depending on what happens with the final vote, it looks like Mr. Hegseth will be confirmed either with 50 or 51 votes in the modern era. I mean, actually in history, the closest we've ever had to something like that was Chuck Hagel in 2013, who was chosen by President Barack Obama to lead the Pentagon. That was considered to be an unusually close vote. He got 58 votes, including multiple Republicans crossing the aisle to vote for him. This is a 50 or 51 vote margin. I mean, we're used to defense secretaries being confirmed on voice votes, or in Leon Panetta's case, at 100-0 kind of vote. What do you think it means for the Pentagon to have somebody come in as their leader with this little support and this controversial and accused of all the things that Mr. Hegseth has struggled to parry during this process?
Well, it means very much instability in the Pentagon. Remember that during the confirmation hearing, Mr. Hegseth would not step away when he was asked, from the question when he was asked. Donald Trump says he wants to come in and fire all the generals, all the people with experience. Would you oppose him? He wouldn't say that he would oppose Donald Trump. He was asked by Elise Slotkin, Senator Slotkin, if he would oppose Donald Trump, if Donald Trump told him to order military men and women to shoot peaceful protesters in the legs, which is what Donald Trump tried to do the first time around. And Pete Hegseth wouldn't say that he would oppose Donald Trump. This is a man that is not going to say no to Donald Trump. The Pentagon absolutely have to be just horrified right now. And you know what else is unprecedented, Rachel? The fact that he never met with a single Democrat on the Armed Services Committee prior to his confirmation hearing. I still have not met with him. And they've kept him and hidden him away from us because they know how supremely unqualified he is for this job.
While we've been speaking, Senator Duckworth, we've just had word that Senator Mitch McConnell, former Republican Senate leader, has just cast his vote on the nomination, and he was a no vote. So Senator Murkowski and Senator Collins, they had voted no on the procedural vote that effectively got us to this vote tonight, and so that was a strong signal that they would be a no vote on the substance in tonight's final vote. We did not know that Senator Mitch McConnell would also vote no. Can I get your reaction to that?
Well, I'm very much pleased to know that there's at least 3 Republicans who will put the well-being of our nation above themselves, which is really what our oath of office was about. I doubt that there'll be another Republican who will cast a no vote. But you know what? I was there in the room when John McCain came in and went thumbs down and saved the ACA. So maybe there's one more person in the Republican Party who has some courage to stand up to Donald Trump. But remember that those who express even the slightest concern about Pete Hegseth came under just a torrent, a deluge, a flood of attacks from the MAGA base. Joni Ernst received so many threats and attacks, outright, threatening her, saying that they would primary her, all the way through to threats against her own security. Pete Hegseth's second wife, lives in fear. She has young children. As you've mentioned, she's under an NDA. She had to have a safe word because she was so afraid of him. You talk to sexual assault survivors, domestic violence survivors, they are terrified, and they're not going to speak out against their abusers. And so here we are now at a place where we have a Secretary of Defense who is accused of these terrible domestic violence issues, is accused of having very low moral character. I mean, he was, described as being drunk, so drunk that he passed out in uniform in a strip club, and has had no experience running an organization of any size near the size of the Pentagon. In fact, the last company that he ran, not-for-profit he so badly bungled their finances, they had to bring in a forensic accountant to figure out what he did with the $10 million budget. And now they're going to put him in charge of a $900 billion Pentagon budget. It's a sad day for our nation. I fear for the military. I fear for our national security. I hope that at least another Republican steps forward. But, I have hopes, but I doubt that we're going to see that happen today, unfortunately.
You have hopes, but you also have eyes and ears to follow what is happening and how they've treated this nomination thus far. Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth, Iraq combat veteran, thank you so much for making time tonight as this vote is still underway. I really appreciate it, Senator.
Thank you, Dr. Maddow.
Let's go back to NBC's Julie Sirkin, who's been watching this vote. Julie, since we last spoke with you, Mitch McConnell has cast a no vote here, which is something of a surprise. So we have no Republican no votes from Collins and Murkowski and McConnell, which means the maximum, if all Democrats stay united against this nomination, it means the maximum number of votes that Pete Hegseth can get is 50. Have all Republicans voted at this point?
It seems like there might be a few left, but I'm watching the vote just as you are. It has not been closed yet. Tom Tillis came in, though, and did confirm that he met with Pete Hegseth, or he spoke with him, rather, for 2 hours today. I think that is fascinating and indicative of how difficult this process has maybe been for him, how much work he's put in to do his quote-unquote due diligence, but I also think it's telling of his political realities. He is up in 2026, and I think if he had cast this vote against Pete Hegseth tonight, his political future would probably be over. Mitch McConnell, having just stepped down as the longest-serving Republican leader in the Senate, clearly has different calculations. His term is also up in 2026, but I would put him in a different category from Senator Tom Tillis just for a second. He had real serious concerns about Hegseth's experience or lack thereof, and his views on national security, his views on foreign policy. This is who McConnell is going to be for the next 2 years. He is going to be, in fact, a top appropriator on the Defense Subcommittee, on the Appropriations Committee. He is going to take everything he cares about in terms of Ukraine, in terms of foreign aid, foreign policy, the Middle East, things that he has been so strong on and even pushing back against in the Trump administration. And certainly we've seen the relationship that it just has fractured over the last year of Trump's presidency. Has gotten even worse since he got out of office. They seem to have kind of made up in the last year or so. But all in all, I think McConnell is going to continue playing this role over the next 2 years. He clearly has made a calculation that he will not run again. He might, but he clearly has made a choice tonight. And this is what I expect to see from Mitch McConnell going forward over the next 2 years. Now that he no longer sits in the leader office, now that he no longer has that level of pressure under him, and certainly that is the pressure that now Senate Majority Leader John Thune has. These senators might not like Pete Hegseth, but they've decided tonight that they are not going to stand up to Donald Trump about it. They are not going to cross him, and they've just seen the writing on the wall, and that Hegseth is going to be the Secretary of Defense, whether they like it or not, and here we are.
Julie, while we've been talking, Tom Tillis has cast his aye vote, as you said, that he had telegraphed that he was. I don't know if you have more information than I do about how many votes are outstanding. I know we don't expect further surprises here, but we also know that Expectations are just that, expectations. Can you tell how many votes are outstanding?
You know, I just asked my team who was diligently watching the floor. It's hard to tell with the screens that we're working with. It seems like some might be left, but I think for the most part, the votes that matter have been cast. Again, J.D. Vance might be needed to break the tie. I'm told he's around, he's close by. If they're holding the vote open just for that moment, that might very be well what's happening. We could hear sirens coming down if he's not in this building already, though I'm told he is. And J.D. Vance will break the tie, and Trump, as predicted this morning, calling out McConnell, Murkowski, and Collins. I mean, these are the names that he can predictably put in the column that will cross him on any big thing he wants to do. If Hegseth sails through tonight, they're going to turn straight for his other nominees. Next week, there's a bunch of them up on the Hill having confirmation hearings, and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. and Kash Patel. I think with Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., you might see bipartisan pushback, but you might also see bipartisan votes potentially in their favor. Kash Patel, so far, I'm hearing no Republicans say that they're a flat-out no on him. McConnell might be one to watch in that space, but I think Tom Tillis today with his vote on Hegseth has forecasted how he will vote for the rest of the nominees next week and what he plans to do with his political future here.
We shall see. Julie Sirkin, NBC News congressional correspondent. Julie, I'm here as soon as you have any news. I'm not going anywhere, so let me know as things develop. We are waiting for the last couple of votes to be cast here. Again, the big news here is that 3 Republicans have cast no votes against Pete Hegseth. He can afford to have 3 Republicans vote no on him because that brings the vote to 50 to 50. And when it's 50 to 50, the vice president, in his capacity as president of the Senate, gets to cast the tie-breaking vote. J.D. Vance, as Julie Sirkin was just saying, is thought to be standing by nearby to break that tie in Pete Hegseth's favor if, as expected, the vote settles at 50-50. Right now, the vote is not closed, and I believe, I may be wrong, but we believe that there are still some senators yet to cast their votes. There are 3 Republican no votes. There aren't other Republicans who were widely being watched in terms of being potential no votes, but the fat lady has not yet sung. I want to bring into the conversation now NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kuby. Courtney, it's really nice to see you. Thanks for being here tonight at this high stakes vote. Courtney, can you hear me? You got me?
I got you now, yeah. Sorry, I think I lost you for a second there.
There we go. So, Courtney, we've had 3 no votes against Pete Hegseth tonight. Collins and Murkowski, who had telegraphed that with yesterday's test vote. Also a no vote for Mitch McConnell. That means that if Pete Hegseth is indeed confirmed tonight, as it looks like he probably will be, he'll be confirmed with fewer votes than I believe any defense secretary in American history. We're used to defense secretaries being confirmed, and we had one turned down. John Tower famously didn't make it through because of allegations of his treatment of women and heavy drinking. That's very awkward. Aside from him being voted down, everybody else who's been confirmed, 58 votes for Barack Obama's nominee in 2013. Other than that, we're used to voice votes or 100-0 votes for a defense secretary. What do you think it may mean at the Pentagon for Pete Hegseth, both to get there and to get there by the skin of his teeth?
Yeah, and John Tower, remember, that's 1989, so that's decades with what is virtually often seen as a bipartisan support for the defense secretary nominee. And remember, during Trump's first term, there was widespread support for his secretaries of defense. He went through several of them, but Jim Mattis was overwhelmingly supported and confirmed, same with Mark Esper. So this is a very different situation here. And the question that I have been asking, while this has been a very uncertain vote for a matter of weeks now, Rachel, is will Pete Hegseth, if confirmed, come into this building in any way weaker than other secretaries of defense have come into the Pentagon? And I got to tell you, I don't know if that's going to be the case. The reality is he has so much support from President Donald Trump, from the administration, and from this overwhelming amount of support, whether it be in social media, whether it be in Republicans, that we have seen the pressure campaign that has existed to get Pete Hegseth's vote above the threshold has been unlike anything I have ever seen before. There has been a real lobbying campaign to get him across the vote. Even what we were hearing from Julie, the fact that he went to the Senate tonight with his wife, with his children to watch this vote. That's not anything that we are used to seeing. I don't want to say unprecedented, but it is very, very, very unusual to see something like that happen. When he was at his confirmation hearing just a week ago, there was this huge swell of veterans who showed up, many of them Navy SEALs and Special Forces troops, soldiers and operators that showed up and marched to show their support for Pete Hegseth. Again, it has been this sort of groundswell of support to really push this nomination across. The other big question I've been asking is, what will his immediate priorities be? He did have this extensive confirmation hearing last week, but the reality is a lot of it focused on his character, concerns about his character. With the drinking, the affidavit from his ex-sister-in-law was not out yet, but there were still a number of stories and concerns that senators had about his character. So we didn't learn a whole lot about his policy, but a couple of things I will really be watching, frankly, potentially even from day one, is what will he do with regards to his past policy comments about the policy of women serving in combat. I do expect very early on him to announce some sort of a review of the standards that exist for serving in various combat units. He has spoken very extensively about that, and I think if there is a change to standards, then people will be asking, how will that impact women and men who serve in these combat units? But the role of women in combat going forward is going to be a big issue here. I'm also looking to how he spoke extensively about the need for a meritocracy in the Pentagon. We are already seeing evidence of, the DEI executive order that came down from the White House. But what about meritocracy when it comes to those men and women serving in uniform? Will we see him immediately take action on that? Those are two of the biggest things I'll be watching right off the bat here, Rachel, if in fact he's confirmed and starts at the Pentagon.
Courtney, let me ask you about one other thing just to watch there. And I mean, one of the concerns, you mentioned that so many of the concerns and so much of the discussion around Mr. Hegseth's confirmation process was about his character and his personal behavior. Some of it was also about his controversial statements about women and about his fellow soldiers and about the kind of house cleaning that he wanted to do at the Pentagon. But the other level of concern about him is that he's never run any large organization of any kind. And there were serious allegations about serious financial and other forms of mismanagement at the two small veterans, sort of pro-Iraq war veterans groups that he was involved in before going to Fox News, where he's a weekend co-host. If this is too big a job for him, and honestly, being Secretary of Defense is probably too big a job for everybody on Earth. It's just such a massive organization. It's so complex, and the needs are so pressing and so interconnected. And it's 3 million people to start. It's the largest organization almost of any kind on Earth, nuclear armed, the whole rest of it. If this is too much for him, if this is a bigger job than he can handle, what we expect in those moments is for people at lower level jobs to be the real operators, to be the people who can really handle the organizational needs and the complexity that a job like this takes. Mm-hmm. At the Pentagon, are those the equivalent of sort of senior executive service people like that, people who really know how the place works? Are those the kinds of people that Pete Hegseth and that the incoming administration has talked about clearing out the way they have at the Justice Department and other large agencies that they've targeted already in this first week?
So not so much. The Pentagon is different from these other agencies because there's this existing structure of the military, those in uniform here. So the Joint Staff, the Joint Chiefs, they serve as a major arm of this building, and the Secretary of Defense, really, I've seen it ebb and flow depending on who the Secretary of Defense is. Some of them rely much more heavily on the civilian policymakers, others rely much more heavily on the uniform service members. So I don't know, I don't want to forecast where Pete Hegseth will go if he's Secretary of Defense, but given his past, he talks a lot about having served in uniform. That was a huge part of his confirmation hearing, someone who had sand and dirt on his boots. So I could see him leaning quite heavily on the uniform, but then that brings us back to this question of, will he have some sort of a widespread review of the senior uniform leaders in the military writ large, not just here in the Pentagon, and how could that impact leadership here? I really think that's going to be one of the first things that we hear about. Also, what kind of Secretary of Defense will Pete Hegseth ultimately decide to be? That's another thing. I've been covering this building since Rumsfeld, and every SecDef is very different. Robert Gates would talk to you about how difficult it was to inspire any kind of real change here in the Pentagon. He talked about this bureaucracy that was just so immovable and how difficult it was to break through that. Pete Hegseth, I've spent weeks working on reporting on him. It seems as if he will be much more, less of a details Secretary of Defense and more of the face of the Pentagon, the face of the military. I'm not saying that he won't make policy decisions, but people I've spoken with him who've worked with him for years, decades in some cases, think that he will be sort of a bigger details kind of Secretary of Defense, and there will be people underneath him, whether it be the Deputy Secretary of Defense, his chief of staff, realistically, the head of policy here in the building. All of those people have been named already, not confirmed yet, but named, who will actually do a lot of the day-to-day running of the military. Also, just again, what we have seen from Pete Hegseth in his time at Fox News, I could see him wanting to be someone who's out and about with the troops and spending time with them more so than spending time here in the building, frankly, Rachel.
Courtney Kuby, NBC News Pentagon correspondent. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Courtney, but it's just invaluable to have you tonight as this is unfolding live on Capitol Hill in the split screen. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Back to Capitol Hill now. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts joins us. Senator Warren, we have been watching live as the vote has come in. I believe I saw you on the Senate floor approach the clerk and give a visible thumbs down on this nominee, which effectively translates as a no with an exclamation point. I know how strongly you feel that Pete Hegseth is unqualified to be Secretary of Defense. What do you make of how the vote has unfolded tonight?
Look, every Democrat understands just how, not just unqualified, just how disqualified this man is to be Secretary of Defense. And now at least 3 Republicans are admitting it openly. Look, when we go to the floor and talk about this, I've given a speech on this, many of the other Democrats have, Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, has. The Republicans who are in the room often, they keep chit-chatting with each other while things are going on. They go about their business. They've all just stood there and watched. They understand what's going on here. The Republicans know what kind of a man Pete Hegseth is. They understand the alcohol abuse problem and how that puts our nation at risk. They understand that the allegations against him on sexual assault are serious and undermine the good order of our active duty military. And they understand that he has no experience running a big agency. All of those are a real problem for our national defense. And the Republicans have decided they're going to put Donald Trump and what he tells them to do ahead of their own understanding of how we protect our nation.
Senator Warren, heading into tonight's vote, we expected, frankly, and again, expectations are a mug's game, but we expected all Democrats to say no to this nominee. We expected Senator Collins and Senator Murkowski on the Republican side to say no. And the question was whether 2 additional Republicans would join with Collins and Murkowski to make this a non-viable nomination. Now, we have had Senator McConnell side with them, which was not something that we knew to count on one way or the other. I wonder, I mean, at best, if he gets through here, it's going to be 50-50 with J.D. Vance as vice president having to break the tie in their favor. I wonder if this vote tonight from Murkowski and Collins and also McConnell makes you feel any differently about some of the even more controversial nominees who are coming up next week. I'm thinking about Kash Patel for the FBI. I'm thinking about Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. I mean, it was just this week, the Washington Post reported for the first time that she not only, when she was in Syria, she not only met with Assad, she met with a Syrian cleric who had threatened to activate a network of suicide bombers inside the United States and Europe. I mean, her history and all of its mysteries is still unfolding in a way that just seems like one more unbelievable controversy upon the next. I wonder if these 3 no votes for Hegseth make you feel any differently than you were previously about some of these more controversial nominees coming up.
I see this as a reminder why it's important to stay in there and fight. If the Democrats had just rolled over with Hegseth and said, we think he's terrible, but not really shown up for the fight, if we had just kind of given him a pass in the hearings, if we had not taken to the floor and continued to beat the drum, continued to talk to the public about it, I think it would have been easy to let this one slip on through, which makes it easy to let the next one slip on through, which makes it easy to let the next one. But what's happened now is, I get it, they're going to drag the vice president in here. He's going to break the tie for only the second time on a cabinet nominee in United States history. We're going to have the VP break the tie, and the Republicans in the Senate are feeling the heat because they recognize that these candidates are disqualified for public office, and they understand that we are taking that case straight to them. So that's the lesson I think we have now. Understand, the fight over Pete Hegseth is not going to be the biggest fight of this entire season.
Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts joining us live just after casting her no vote against this nomination. Senator, thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you.
Okay.
This vote is still open. We are keeping a close eye on the Senate. At this point, best case scenario for Pete Hegseth is that it is a 50-50 vote on his nomination. As Senator Warren was just explaining, that would result in Vice President J.D. Vance, in his role as President of the Senate, coming in and breaking the tie in Mr. Hegseth's favor. As Senator Warren correctly notes, that would be the second time in U.S. history that has ever had to happen for a cabinet nominee. Again, we're waiting for the last few votes to come in, but at best, he will be at 50-50. All right now we're going to take a quick break. Still ahead, we have an interview I'm really, really looking forward to. One of the Justice Department lawyers who prosecuted several, I could even say many, of the now pardoned January 6 defendants, this prosecutor resigned from the Justice Department today, and tonight she's going to be here live on set with us, and that's next.